So Jennifer and I will be discussing kind of the meat of the project, that is this collaboration between Southern Sector Rising, Downwinders, and the Inclusive Communities Project. So like Fatima mentioned, my name is Evelyn Mayo, and I'm the chair of Downwinders at Risk. We are a 25-year-old grassroots environmental justice organization that's been in town for 25 years. So Jennifer, feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. So as you heard, my name is Jennifer Rangel, and I'm with the Inclusive Communities Project. ICP is an affordable fair housing nonprofit that advocates for neighborhood equity and fair housing options. First, we're going to go ahead and get started with the basics for tonight. We're going to talk about zoning, land use, and neighborhood plans. Zoning and land use are two different things. For example, the Dallas Zoo area is zoned for regional retail, which allows the zoo to exist with a specific use permit. Today, this land is being used for a zoo, but by right, this zoning district can also allow retail and office uses. This is why it's important to know about the zoning districts in your neighborhood, because how you see the land being used today is likely not the only use allowed by right or with a specific use permit. Are there any vacant lots in your community, and do you know how they are zoned for? So what is zoning? It's a word obviously we've talked a lot about tonight. You could think of zoning as the gatekeeper of what you see in your community, because it tells you where homes, industrial plants, stores, and other uses can exist. The entire city of Dallas is divided by zoning districts. Each zoning district will have rules for things such as setbacks, the maximum height, the size for a lot, density, and so forth. However, at the end of the day, zoning should promote the public health, safety, and general welfare of all. Zoning cannot exist on its own. Zoning regulations must be adopted by the city in accordance to a comprehensive plan. The citywide comprehensive plan is a guide for land use and development decisions in the city of Dallas. forwardDallas is the city's comprehensive plan, adopted in 2006 and updated with some area plans periodically. You can think of forwardDallas as the bird's eye view of the city, but if you want to dive deeper into an area and get specific, that's when neighborhood plans come into play. Neighborhood plans are a collective vision of an area, and neighborhood plans typically take precedence over forwardDallas at the City Plan Commission or City Council level. If the plan truly reflects the neighborhood's vision, it becomes a tool for self-determination and neighborhood equity. So how is zoning racist, and how do we undo it? Earlier, I shared that the purpose of zoning is to protect the public health, safety, and general welfare. But if you look at the legacy of zoning and segregation from across the country, including places like Dallas, they often work side by side. Zoning has a history of being used for racial segregation. On top of that, communities of color often found themselves zoned next to heavy industrial polluters because of government decisions.
In that sense, Dallas really is no different than many other American cities. In this map here on the right, you can see in blue the areas that are zoned IR or IM, which are the two heaviest industrial zoning districts in the city zoning code. What we really want to emphasize here is that the areas that are currently zoned for those industrial uses are the same areas that are more likely to become sites of additional industrial uses. If you were an industrial operator and you're coming into the city, it really is the path of least resistance to try and site your operation in an area that's already got the zoning that accommodates the land use you want to have. You don't want to go through a zoning change that's costly, time consuming, and expensive. So unless the zoning itself is changed, there will be continual increases in industrial operators in industrially zoned areas. Here we have a classic example of a residential street in South Dallas with a metal scrapyard right at the end. And if you were to turn the camera around, you would see a highway right behind you. So literally, Black and brown neighborhoods in Dallas are intertwined with industrial operations by design. And if we don't get rid of the industrial zoning, this will continue to be an issue. So as Dr. Dowdy mentioned, at the town hall last month, we provided a briefing on poison by zip code, the research I did in partnership with Paul Quinn College. And the whole point of that research was to actually examine and account for the legally permitted air pollution across the city by zip code and council district. And so this map in the middle illustrates the different pollution burdens by zip code. And as you can see, there's a disproportionate high concentration of air pollution burden in the southern part of the city. Now that same area that's emphasized in the middle map is a very similar area as the incidence of asthma cases. To the right, this was a map created by Parkland. Then on the far left, we've got the incidence of severity of COVID-19. So you can see there's a snowball effect. When you have dangerous land uses, you cause air pollution issues, which increase asthma cases. And now we're seeing in 2020, a severe case of COVID-19 is more likely to arise. So beyond just legal air pollution issues, the southern sector also has illegal air pollution issues. And this research was conducted last year when I was at Legal Aid of Northwest Texas, called In Plain Sight. And the purpose was to understand the underlying land use and enforcement issues that led to the formation of Shingle Mountain. It seems like such an impossible one-off thing, but in reality, there was a list of both land use and enforcement issues that are fairly common across several neighborhoods in the southern sector. So this map here with the red spots illustrates areas that had one or more of these potential violations that could lead to the next Shingle Mountain.
Neighborhood plans by and for the neighborhood is an act of self-defense. Being proactive is being prepared, because without a plan, neighborhoods have to play whack-a-mole with undesirable land uses such as concrete batch plant. Your neighborhood plan is a way to amplify your community's voice at the City Plan Commission and City Council level. The process we have created is rooted in grassroots community engagement that welcomes people of all ages and background, including non-English speakers. We recognize that most people might have minimal or no background knowledge on neighborhood planning, zoning, and land use and the like. Therefore, education is a major component in our process. The ultimate goal is to help create neighborhood land plans that propose for adoption at City Council that lead to rezoning through forwardDallas that undoes the racist harms of the past. We meet people where they are. Pre-COVID, that meant at a recreation center, library, someone's front yard, or nowadays that can be via phone or video conference. Our community engagement approach is the Place It process, which is an inclusive community engagement technique created by urban planner James Rojas. The process recognizes the values and lived experiences of people from racially diverse communities that have historically not been included during the planning process. The visioning session uses everyday objects, as you see on the screen, that help translate people's dreams and ideas into physical forms and models to help inform a neighborhood's vision. A neighborhood's vision is important because it's the backbone of a neighborhood plan. If you recall from earlier, I mentioned that zoning and land use are two different things. We conduct, between Evelyn and I, a parcel analysis that looks at all the lots in the area in your neighborhood. We look at how the land is being used, zoning districts in your neighborhood, and we discuss the other uses that could also appear given the zoning districts in your area.
So we wanted to illustrate an example of the work we've done over the last several months with one particular neighborhood. So as Dr. Dowdy mentioned, last year or in early 2019, there were two batch plants, concrete batch plants proposed in this residential neighborhood just south of Loop 12 and east of I-45 near Paul Quinn College. Luckily, Paul Quinn College, Southern Sector Rising, Downwinders, and the Inclusive Communities Project showed up to the City Plan Commission and fought against these batch plants. This was only less than a year after that same cohort, along with neighborhood allies, had fought two other concrete batch plants in Joppy, one of the two intact freedmen towns in Dallas, just north of this neighborhood, north of Loop 12. So at this point, in the span of 2 to 3 years, we as a group had fought 4 concrete batch plants within a few miles of each other, both in Black and brown neighborhoods. And so we were put in a position of being reactive to these incoming permits. Luckily, in that process, in the community coming and showing up and speaking in front of the Plan Commission, a completely different narrative than what's written on the map was brought to light. As you can see in this map on the left, these areas outlined in green and yellow are residential areas. There are 23 homes in this small community, but none of them have residential zoning. So this map on the right, it illustrates the actual zoning in the neighborhood, which, as you know, if you were just looking at the map and looking at the zoning information, you would think, why not put a batch plant in this industrial research area and in this agricultural area near this industrial area? This does not yell neighborhood in terms of how the zoning is written, but that's completely contradictory to the lived experience of the community in this neighborhood. And so luckily, due to the pressure that this community was able to put on both City Council and the Plan Commission to actually re-examine appropriate land use in totality. This is the same neighborhood that is host to Shingle Mountain, by the way. They were able to initiate an authorized hearing, which means the area was outlined by the community and proposed to have a re-examination of appropriate land use. Now, that's a process that has a long waiting list, and so it doesn't mean that the zoning is going to change overnight or that the city would necessarily even begin their engagement for several months to a few years. However, the community decided to go ahead and get ahead of the process and work with this new coalition to actually create the vision and come up with zoning recommendations so that by the time the city does come around or during this forwardDallas process, there is consensus over desired land use that's safe for the community. So as Jennifer mentioned, this is us out in the neighborhood meeting in the front yard of one of the residents, doing the place it process, as well as using the parcel analysis to identify specific issues within the community besides just the underlying zoning concerns. And just in the last few months, since we were meeting in person and now have since gone to other, alternative modes of communication, the community has come up with a loose, vision for proposed future land use. So what I really want to point out here is on the current zoning map to the left, as you can see, the majority of the land is zoned for industrial research, right? Which is that medium heavy industrial use. However, if you were to change the zoning to this proposed future zoning, which includes commercial service, you're not actually impacting any of the current business operators in that area. So this is a process called downzoning, where the operators in that area do not need the heavy industrial research zoning to be legally functioning. They only need this lower commercial service zoning to get the job done. And this is where the self-defense piece comes in, because the community is able to be proactive, and a commissioner will be able to look at this map and say, oh, there's no need for industrial uses here. This is clearly not an industrial area. And right now, the community is vulnerable to batch plants, other industrial operators coming in by right, and then causing the longer issue of having to remove them should the community decide that's not an appropriate land use. So just to really hone in the theory here, we think that changing the industrial zoning will then change the land use, in turn preventing dangerous land use from being near people, primarily people of color, and therefore increasing neighborhood equity. And so with that, we're going to close out with a brief video. So just bear with me. I hope this works.
Dallas has a long history of redlining, environmental racism, and housing discrimination. That is, Black and brown neighborhoods have been zoned to host major polluters and industrial operators. The most recent egregious example is Shingle Mountain. Proactive policies, it happened because of poor land use planning and a lack of environmental oversight. So yes, there could be another Shingle Mountain in the future without intervention. The factors identified in the research by Legal Aid of Northwest Texas are factors that exist in over 50% of southern Dallas. To prevent the next legal or illegal environmental health crisis, Downwinders at Risk partnered with Southern Sector Rising and the Inclusive Communities Project to provide technical assistance and education on how to undo racist zoning in your neighborhood. Addressing racist and dangerous zoning in your neighborhood is an act of self-defense to protect your family and neighbors. The Southern Dallas Self-Defense Project, directed by Downwinders at Risk, Southern Sector Rising, and the Inclusive Communities Project, and sponsored by the Communities Foundation of Texas, partners with neighborhood associations to develop land use plans that write out toxic polluters, enforce fair housing, and center the community's vision for a healthy, safe neighborhood where all can thrive regardless of race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. We meet people where they are, whether it is outside someone's front yard, at a recreation center, on Zoom, or by phone. Our goal is to facilitate through grassroots engagement plans for neighborhoods that reflect their life experiences and values. We can provide one-off education events on zoning and land use, or can tailor our full 10-session curriculum to your community's needs, ending with a draft land use vision or plan. The goal is to put neighborhood-driven plans first in the rewrite of the forwardDallas land use plan, being renewed starting 2020. If your neighborhood association or grassroots community group is interested in working to address racist zoning and land use practices that are negatively impacting your public health, safety, and general welfare, reach out. We can help you through neighborhood planning. We look forward to working together to create a more equitable city that protects you, your family, and your neighbors.
Creating a neighborhood plan takes time, commitment, and is a lengthy process. However, creating a neighborhood plan is also the opportunity to speak up, undo the racist harms of the past, feeding today's inequities, and is a method to stop with the whack-a-mole fights. We are here to provide resources and education during your act of self-defense and fight for neighborhood equity. All materials discussed tonight and others can be found on the English or Spanish websites shown on the screen. We also have a Google form on our website where you can request a workshop for your neighborhood. We want to work with you, and we look forward to connecting with you soon.